trigger that.
I will do I think when I left 8 years ago, they were Canadian, not Canadian, but I've been working on it a long time and went through several revisions. Well, I left in 2017, December 2017.
The Northern Lights.
That's why I
That's out his window.
could have been.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to our January 20th Fairmont Board of Trustees meeting. If everyone please rise and join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the first item of business, approval of minutes from January 6th. Did everyone get a chance to review this?
Yes.
Can I get a motion to approve?
Motion.
Do I hear a second? All in favor? Aye. Next item is approval of warrant.
I move that we approve warrant number 012026 in the amount of $47,862.51. The big ticket item on this was the fire department physicals.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Next up, department reports.
Mayor, we have nothing, no important updates tonight for the police department.
I actually have a couple of questions for you, if you wouldn't mind coming forward.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So one of the issues that we've been struggling with and has kind of gone back and forth and doesn't make any sense to almost everyone involved is the question about truck parking on Gare Street. So I had a conversation with you previously where you expressed some of the limitations and what you could do about it. And I'd just like to hear that from your perspective and start the conversation about if there's some way that we can fix that.
Yeah, of course. So the Transportation Committee's been working on this issue for quite some time, trying to find spots. Unfortunately, it's a private road, so we can enforce fire zones and handicap zones that are designated within our code on private property. Those aren't marked for those zones, just no parking, so we can't go out there and issue summonses. We can work with the property owner, obviously, to move the vehicles when they're in the way obstructing if someone calls, but we can't go out there and ticket those vehicles.
Okay, thank you. That is fairly confusing. And I think it was good for everyone to hear that. And then there was also a letter that came in
Yeah,
from a resident.
I had a question for you, Chief. We
Sure.
got a letter from a resident who raised a couple of issues. One of them, which I wanted to address with you, and that was, he does a lot of walking in the village and he spends a lot of time on the pier. And he noticed that there's a lot of cars that are parked there and they're keep their engine running, they're idling. I know we have a law on the books with regard to excessive idling for parked cars. Rather than issue any summonses, can we maybe issue some warnings if we're down there and we see it happening?
Yeah, of course. And a lot of times when we're talking with the vehicles that are the owners, either they're fishing and they jump back in the car at this time period, so they're actually sitting in the car majority of the time, they'll jump out and check it, but we'll keep an eye on that and see.
So,
Absolutely.
Thank you.
great, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Charlie.
Just a quick note, I got the, Dennis Michaels reviewed my letter and made some modifications to it, so that's ready to go out. I just want your permission to send that out now. And then the second thing I started to do, which you had asked me to do, I started counting seats. I figured we could put that on one spreadsheet at the end where we have the counted number of seats, their file off, their grandfathered stuff, do everything right across one sheet that shows everything.
That's terrific. I think that'd be very
Two
helpful.
restaurants are closed right now. Sidewalk's been closed since the beginning of the year. I don't know what's going on with them. And then the other one that's not open right now is Gyro Downtown. They were selling the business to somebody else. He paid half of it, started up the business and walked away. So right now it's he still has the lease on the building, the original occupant, but he doesn't know what he's going to do yet. If he's going to open up another restaurant there or sell it to somebody else, or he doesn't know. So,
So, that's terrific, thank you. And a question for you, I hope that Tommy would be here tonight, because I would have asked him previously, but are you aware of any plan for us to fix up the windows on the front of the building?
you mean the front doors
No, the windows
on this building?
on this building.
The front windows were already repainted, those are Andersons, the lower ones. So the lower, I think 6 of them years ago, I had gotten Anderson replacements, and we did the clerk's office, and the 2 windows on the front of the building, just the lower section got done. None of the upper arches or any of that got done. But those are all energy efficient Anderson windows that we did replacements with. And that was, it's gotta be 7, 8, maybe 9 years, I think, you know.
Yeah, it's been a while, and I think that the paint is starting to peel off of the surround for the windows, not the windows themselves, but.
Yes, the old opening.
Yeah,
The last time that got painted was when they fixed the roof on the both edges and got rid of the Yankee gutters, and they put the gutters to the outside. They reshingled the lower part of the roof then, and while the guy was here with the crane, I had suggested to somebody, why don't we get him to paint the front of the building, and they did. So they did the trim, and I think they did the windows on the front. I don't know if they did the individual panes, but I think they did the trim around the windows real quick. But I agree with you. You know, maybe we should look even to getting those capped. Because they're Anderson windows now, so they're 20-year warranty on the finish. So maybe you get the front cap, because those are square windows, it'd be easy to do, and then at least it buys us some time.
sure.
And Seth Glasson just bought a window manufacturing company from a guy that he used to get his custom-made windows from. Got all the guy's equipment, is opening it up in Nyack, and he would be able to reproduce these exactly the way ours was. I said, well, we might have some work for you, because some of these is going to rot and stuff. Because he was in for some permits today, and he was all excited to tell me that, because he knows I'm a woodworker, so, yeah. So I said, oh, we might have some work for you on some of these old windows.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess that's it for department reports, no fire. So moving on, next item on the agenda is old business. Jennifer, do you have any old business?
Yes, just one thing, an update. Justice Court had received a grant to purchase new front doors for the front of this building, including the handicap automatic opening. They will be out, Muncie Glass will be out on January 27th and the 28th to install the new doors. And we have an electrician coming on the 28th to hook up the electricity for the automatic door opener. And I believe with the new front doors, it also included the interior, that metal door that we have downstairs between the police and the clerk. I believe we're getting a new door there as well.
Excellent.
So, yeah, that's coming soon.
That's not all covered by the grant, though. The
No,
grant.
half of it was
Half of
paid
it.
by the village and the other half was covered by the grant.
Anyone else for old business? So I have one item I wanted to discuss briefly, which was at our last board meeting, we did set our fee and lieu of parking inventory at a number of 60, which was a reduction from the current total fee and lieu of parking spaces that are allocated. And that's one of the things we're reviewing tonight with our special permit list. So I just wanted to give a bit of explanation about where that number with that reduction of 19 came from. And so what I did after looking at a number of different conflicting estimates of what amount of parking is actually available is I spent some time and went around and did my own inventory of what I saw as available in the various lots. And what I came up with after excluding the overnight parking permits that are issued for the river lot and for lot D, the fire department parking that's reserved in the river lot, the long-term storage and other uses that are going on in Lot D, and also the health club use and handicap spots that are in Lot S. I came up with 60 spots in Lot D, 27 spots in Lot S, and 23 spots in the river lot, which brings us up to 110. And also, the other portion of our analysis of parking, when we look specifically at fee and lieu of parking, that is overlooked is we have a number of restaurants who have their restaurant seating grandfathered in and are not required to provide fee and lieu of parking spots, even though they do not have any physical off-street parking inventory, and that number is about 50. So if I take 50 off of 110, I end up with 60, and that's how I got to that number. And I just felt that I was remiss in not explaining that better at our last meeting, so I wanted to fill in that gap. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Thank you. All right, moving on to new business. Jennifer, do you have new business?
No.
Excellent. Does anyone have new business? Do I have new business? I do have new business. So, Dennis, I spoke to you briefly about this. We formerly had an ad hoc traffic committee that looked at some of these issues, and that has since gone away. And one of the criticisms that came up with that was that they didn't actually have a real mission or role or any kind of authority because they were just an ad hoc committee. So what I would like to do is to legislate forming a permanent transportation commission that is encoded, that's codified in our code, what its structure is, what its responsibilities are, and essentially defining it as an advisory board to the board of trustees, the planning board, and the zoning board of appeals. So I'd like to ask you if you can draft legislation to create that for us to review. And the other thing I wanted to...
Just, I'll make my own suggestions in the draft, you know, cutting and pasting from various municipalities. But I invite you, certainly, Nate, as the mayor, to say, okay, we don't really want this as one of their roles or authorities or jurisdictional powers. You know, I invite your input, is what I'm trying to say.
Happy to provide.
They really won't have any jurisdictional powers. They're just going to be advisory, is what
Yes.
you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do, and thank you. So the other thing I wanted to mention, two things briefly. I attended a Rockland County Stormwater Consortium meeting this morning. Our engineer, Bart Brody, also attended this. And there's a new law that was passed last year that all municipalities have to complete 100% of their MS4 mapping by 2027, by January of 2027. We only have about 20% of ours mapped at this point. For the last 3 years, we put in for grants to try to cover additional mapping and had been unsuccessful previously, but just recently learned that we were awarded $64,000 for this year for engineering services to complete our MS4 mapping. And Park discussed this in the workshop meeting today and said he thought we were on track for being able to get that done. So that's good news. That'll be an important thing. We're required to do everything that drains into the Sparkhill Creek by the end of 2027. We have a bit more time on things that don't drain into the creek because that is a distressed waterway. And then the other thing that just came across this afternoon was there was an announcement for a new grant program for municipalities to obtain open space. And it favors properties that are along the river. And so we're looking around to see if there are any properties that might qualify for that. And we did look a few years back, like 10 years ago, at 675 Paramount Avenue, which is the old Knights of Columbus property. However, it was a very marketable property, and we were unable, between the grant and the Scenic Hudson grant, to get together enough money to actually make the purchase. It was bought out from under us by just someone looking to develop it for commercial purposes. And I don't believe it's currently for sale. It's being rented and used for storage of boats and parking for 701. But there is another property that has been sort of a blight for a long time, which is 573 Paramount Avenue. So this is a little bit south of Kinney Street on the east side of the road. It's a very narrow property, but you'll see right now there's a chain link fence up on it. And this was purchased, I think about 14 years ago. And there was an existing home in terrible shape that was brought down. The person that bought it came to the planning board with plans that mostly got approved to build a new house there. But then something fell through with that and it never happened. And I checked on the county GIS system this afternoon. It's currently owned by the county. So it seems like the owner didn't pay his county taxes and had the property taken away by the county, which means it might be something that could be acquired for not a ridiculous sum of money. And it is an area that's very heavily impacted by flooding. And so one of the encouraged things to do with properties that become less suitable for residential use due to flooding issues is to turn them into parks and make them river access points. So I'd like to pursue that a little bit further, try to find out if the county might be interested in selling that and if that would qualify for this new grant. And that's all I have for new business. Moving on, public comment. I'm sorry, I thought I said everything there.
Oh, okay. I have some new business. The board had received an email from a resident with regard to raising certain issues in the village. One of which has to do with the Plastic Reduction Act, which is currently on the floor of the Assembly. And what that proposes is the possibility of us saving money. The estimate for 9 municipalities already in the state is like $411 million in savings by cost cutting and reducing the amount of plastics that are being used, up to 30% reduction. It also provides significantly for a small fee to be paid by local small businesses who have packaged goods, and those fees would get paid to the municipality. So the resident was asking for us to review the statute and, if warranted, climb on board and issue a letter of that we are in approval and support of the Plastic Reduction Act. So what I'm asking the board to do is we table further discussion on to give everybody on the board an opportunity to review the act and the possible cost savings, and then we bring it up at another meeting. Another issue that was raised by the resident had to do with idling cars on the pier, which I've already addressed with the chief. And we're going to see if we can police that a little bit better. We understand that people fish there in the winter and they want to be in their car for warmth. So that's been addressed. With regard to one of the issues that was raised having to do with trees along the pier road on both sides, that there are rocks that are on the root bed that are hindering the growth of certain trees. I took a drive down there today and I noticed there were a lot of immature trees that looked like they were dead. So what I'd like to do, I guess, is explore the possibility with DPW the next time Tom is here. When the spring comes, see what trees are dead or dying and have those removed because they're just going to be unsightly. With regard to other trees that are either compromised or healthy, we want to keep them healthy, and if there's other material that have been taken from other parks and projects in the village, and I understand Half Moon Park may have some materials and rocks we can use, we could shoulder those trees that are compromised and possibly save them without diminishing the amount of parking that is alongside the roads for people enjoying the pier or fishermen. The last thing that was raised, and it's been raised before, so technically I guess it's old business, but it's been addressed previously, so that would be done again, and that has to do with gas leaf blowers, which has been raised previously. The board was going to address it, and further discussion was had, and to avoid the possibility of neighbor against neighbor and the possibility of police involvement and enforcement, that whole discussion was tabled. But I understand that our mayor has come up with a proposal that may satisfy, at least to a certain extent, the whole leaf blower situation. So I'll turn it over to Nate.
Sure, thank you. So yes, the concept that I came up with after discussing this with a couple of other municipalities is a two-step process. And I've discussed this with Dennis. The first part of the process is to create a registry for landscaping contractors in Piermont. So right now, if somebody comes in as a contractor to do work on a home, they're required to go to Charlie and get a permit for that, which gives Charlie an opportunity to make sure that they're licensed and insured. If you're doing landscaping in the Village of Piermont, since there is no permit required for landscaping services, you never go in and register or announce yourself to Charlie in any way. He doesn't have any opportunity to determine if you are actually licensed and insured, as you should be. And also, he doesn't have a good opportunity to give you a list of the rules and regulations that are pertinent to landscaping within the Village of Piermont. So what I would like to do is to establish a registry for landscaping contractors, and then also create a ban on commercial use of gas-powered leaf blowers that would be one of the things that we would inform people of when they came in to register with the building department as landscapers doing business in the village of Piermont. And that way, some of the enforcement burden that would otherwise fall to the police based on neighbors calling in complaints could be cut off at the pass by telling them up front, that's not something that you're allowed to do, here are the parameters, and also giving the building inspector as code enforcement officer an opportunity to help with that enforcement, whether it be issuing a warning or making sure that they have the information. And so hopefully that takes the edge off of the parts of this that looked like they were not possible to do in the past. And that's something that I'm looking forward to bringing up to legislate a little bit later on in the year as we get to the spring season. Thank you.
Question?
Please.
I may have misunderstood, but it sounded like individual homeowners would still be able to use gas leak blowers, but not commercial.
That's correct.
So why that dichotomy, that if I live next door and I don't like a leaf blower, I don't really care who's holding it?
That's a fair point. So the reasoning behind that is that when we discussed this in the past, a number of private property owners who don't hire landscapers to do work on their property and have invested in landscaping equipment, including gas-powered leaf blowers, pushed back, and there was a question of whether or not this could be interpreted as a taking, because someone as a property owner, a couple people came in and said, hey, I have a half-acre lot, I have a lot of trees, I couldn't do this without a gas-powered leaf blower, it's impractical, and you're, creating hardship for me. So my hope is that we can demonstrate to these folks that you can do just as good a job with an electric blower as you can with a gas blower, and as the replacement cycle rolls around and their equipment fails and needs to be replaced, they would see fit to replace it with something electric. But I just don't want to immediately make equipment that people have invested in garbage that they can't use themselves.
One more question, please. Would you consider an exemption for fall cleanup and spring cleanup? Because that's a limited time period.
I would, and in fact, some of the programs I've looked at in other communities start out with seasonal bans only, so in between the spring and fall cleanup essentially. And I'm not averse to doing that, but I still think that we should start by focusing on the commercial landscapers rather than the individual homeowners.
Sure.
All right. Do we have any public comment? We do. We have Noreen Myers-Wright. Noreen, will you come forward, please?
Hi, my name is Noreen Myers-Wright. I live at 508 Gare. I am the president of the Piermont Landing HOA, and I am here tonight representing them. I would like to talk about the request that we had made previously in December for traffic safety on Gare Street and Piermont Avenue. But before we get to that, I would just like to state regarding what you just announced with the gas-powered leaf blowers. We have we contract with a commercial landscaper. Our contract runs from December through the end of December. So if you're going to put changes in place this coming spring, that is going to negatively impact that contractor, and our budget is going to be affected. We've already signed a contract with terms for gas-powered leaf blowers. I'm happy to address this for our next year's contract, but this is not something we can address for 2026. So I don't know if you can create a workaround for the landing or for other, people in our situation, but I just wanted to point that out to you.
Appreciate that.
I'm not looking to make it more difficult because frankly, I'm in favor of reducing the amount of gas-powered leaf blowers. Okay, so the traffic. I thank you for your note back to me today, Nate. And I just have a couple of follow-ups. I want to clarify, when you say that the Landing HOA should support and advocate with the owner of Gare Street, are we talking about Phil Griffin?
Yes.
Okay. Will the village board also be reaching out to Mr. Griffin
Yes.
to ask him permission to, and then that's what is a little confusing. You want our HOA to write to Mr. Griffin asking him for permission for our village police department to issue parking tickets to trucks parking at the end of Gare Street
Yes.
in the no parking areas. Okay. I'm not sure how us, our organization asking him is gonna influence him, but I'm happy to work with the board and with our with the management company. I do have, and I do hope the committee that you're going to form for traffic safety is created soon, because this situation at the end of Gare does not just impact the Piermont Landing residents, that impacts anybody visiting our village. And giving traffic tickets is not the solution. That negatively impacts our restaurant owners, and that is not something that we're asking for. I do want to know how, if this is in place, that a private property owner, an owner of a street, has to give permission for no parking tickets to be issued. How is it that tickets are being given inside of Piermont Landing when our residents park in a no parking zone?
So I think I can answer part of that, and I think part of it Dennis can answer more eloquently, but the reason why I asked our chief to make a comment about it was because there's all kinds of confusing elements to this. I understand it doesn't make any sense. But what I do know is that one reason why tickets can be issued on private property is if you're parking in a fire lane. If it's marked as a fire lane, that's different than it being marked as simply no parking. And we do have enforcement authority, as the chief just pointed out, to write those types of tickets. So I don't know if what you're referring to may be someone parking in a fire lane, because for a lot of people, no parking just is no parking. Whatever the reason on the sign for the no parking doesn't really matter.
Right.
And I'm also unsure if some of those tickets may have been written in error in a situation where there was an officer that perhaps was newer to the force and wasn't aware of how bizarre our situation is here in Fairmont. But I would like to ask Dennis if he could speak a little bit more eloquently about that particular code.
Under the New York State Fire Code, it may offer power to a fire inspector or building inspector who also has authority to enforce the New York State Uniform Fire Prevention Building Code for violations of the New York State Uniform Fire Prevention Building Code. As the mayor pointed out, that might be the answer to part of your mystery, is how come tickets are being issued down on the landing. It may be because these are fire, for fire zones. What do you call them? Parking fire zones.
I didn't realize there was a difference between no parking and a traffic, no parking, and a fire zone, no
So
parking.
leaving that aside,
Uh-huh.
under New York State Vehicle Traffic Law, you may want to make a note of this section. New York State Vehicle and Traffic Law 1640, 1640 little a is in Apple. 1640-A enables a municipality to enforce parking and traffic on private property complexes, hospitals, strip malls, condominium complexes, apartment complexes, under that section of the State Vehicle and Traffic Law, but only under certain conditions. One is a request from the property owner or someone with managerial authority over that property. So a request from the property owner or someone with managerial authority over that property. There's another mechanism by how that can happen, is by a request from the chief of police. And usually has to be justified. It doesn't say that specifically in the statute, but there's gotta be some justification for, safety, public health and safety and welfare. The police chief or fire commissioner is the word they use, and I don't know if a fire company, fire chief would have that authority under 6040-A, but certainly the police
To
chief
request
does.
what?
To request the village board of trustees to adopt a local law. So our Piermont code would have to add an article or subchapter empowering our police force to enforce traffic and parking regulations on these types of large private properties. That's the answer.
And that's why I asked Dennis to explain it, because that was too much for me, but since.
In a nutshell, the Village of Piermont Police Department may potentially be able to enforce parking and traffic on large complexes of properties such as the Piermont Landing, Paradise
If a
Harbor.
request was made?
Under,
Is that what you're saying?
there's, the main two alternatives are a request from the owner or managerial of the manager
Which we did
of
not
the
do.
property. The other is a request by the chief of police or fire commissioner.
And the reason I put that into my message to you was because it's just so extraordinarily complicated, but it is Phil's property, and yet the easement says that the HOA is responsible for the maintenance and landscaping. So I didn't know if that put you in a quote-unquote managerial role, where that might be something you're allowed to ask for, and I also don't know if Phil has made arrangements with anyone, like for example, some of the things stored in Lot D. It's, it's private property, we're not supposed to have overnight parking there, but he's granted people permission to put stuff for long-term storage there. And my understanding is that he's within his right to do that. So part of what's confusing about this may be, and I don't want to say that this is the case for sure because I have nothing to base it on, it's just a possibility, but it may be that he gave permission to Riley's to use that location on Gare Street, despite the fact that it says no parking, to do loading and unloading of their vehicles, and that makes everything more complicated. So, yes, the reason I put in my message to you that I would appreciate your support in advocating for that is that he may not be inclined to do so. The fact of the matter is, he has not done so for many, many years, and that may be because he's enjoying the ability to kind of have it both ways. I don't know. We may have to try to convince him that this is something that is in everyone's best interest, and I'm happy to work with you on getting that done.
If I could just add to that, Nate, most municipal boards, village boards, town boards, are hesitant to enforce police enforcement on private property complexes without the request of the property owner, or the actual word in the statute is a person in general charge of the operation and control of the private property. So I'm not sure if the HOA would
No, we're not in charge of, if we're talking about the intersection, that has nothing to do with us except that we have the cost of maintaining it. But, as far as making this type of request, that's not us. My other part of my question
If I could
was
just finish
inside.
my point.
Oh,
To
sorry.
segue off what Nate was saying is, I think hinting at, is that sure, we could have the police chief look into it, report back to the village board and say, yeah, I think this is a good idea that we adopt a local law allowing the Village of Piermont's Police Department to enforce traffic and parking on the private condominium apartment complexes, out in RD East, RD West, et cetera. But if the owner is not cooperating
That's
with
sort of the
that,
end of the line.
it could just, the village boards and town boards are hesitant to get involved in that if the property owner is not gonna be cooperative. So I think that's what Nate is kind of hinting at, is we prefer to have the property owner, i.e. Phil,
So would we? So,
indicate his interest in that.
so who is held liable should an accident happen? And I have to say, it's an accident waiting to happen on that corner. Who's held liable? The property owner?
I think it's the property owner. Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I wouldn't let you answer that. If it was the village, we wouldn't tell you. And I wouldn't tell the mayor to tell you. If the village has no enforcement, but I'm gonna answer it as generally as I can. Obviously, each accident is dependent upon the factual circumstances surrounding it, leading up to it. notice of defects, prior notice of defects to whether it's a private property owner or to municipality. So many factors go into liability, and in New York State, we have something called comparative negligence. It's very rare that one person or entity or business is 100% liable. It's usually apportioned by a jury, 70%, 30%, 60-40, et cetera. But if it's private property, a private roadway, and it's not maintained or policed by the village, it would be hard to point to the village as being a primarily liable party for some accident or misfortune which had happened on a private road.
Understood. My concern, as complicated as this is, if Piermont Landing has been given the easement under the term with the guidelines that we have to maintain that road, our concern is how far does that go? And where do we become responsible for something happening because the owner of the property chooses to allow people, trucks, to obstruct people's view and an accident happens. So this is why, you know, we're concerned because somehow we are going to get snagged into this. So I really urge you to create your committee and figure out a solution other than parking tickets.
That's a good point. I mean, if you bring it up that the landing is responsible for maintaining that street, they're also responsible, I would argue, for maintaining safe passage on that street. And if there is a truck that is historically parked in that lane at the foot of Gare Street, that could potentially raise some liability as not being able to maintain safe passage on the
I
street.
think there's certainly.
An argument could be made.
Yeah. The private property owner has a responsibility to maintain his or her private roadways and places where.
It's something we should probably address
Well, which,
sooner than later with.
which might be part of what you can communicate with the property owner in that, you know, we have concerns here that we have some shared responsibility for what might occur. And we don't see anywhere in this easement agreement that we're responsible for taking on liability for you giving someone permission to do something that creates an unsafe situation.
Or not giving the police department authority to enforce the no parking sign.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just follow up.
Can you come forward, please, sir?
On the village liability,
State your name, please.
Ira White, resident here. On the village liability question, are there signs that indicate these roads are private roads as opposed to village roads in the places that you're concerned about? Because if people are traveling, I would think people who don't know think that they are in fact Piermont roads, and they're in theory, possibly relying on the fact that Piermont is taking care of its roads. So if there were an accident there, I would be surprised if Piermont weren't named as primary defendant, sorry about that. So perhaps you should, I've never researched
We
this.
can't put signs on private
No,
property.
but you could put signs on
There
public
is a
property.
sign that says welcome to Piermont Landing.
But it just seems to me that this notion that there's no liability for Piermont, although I've certainly not researched
The motion to
it, is
dismiss
questionable.
shortly after the filing of the suit would resolve it. I know there's, you know, the village would have to have their insurance, you know, our insurance council would have to get involved. That costs money, albeit it's covered by our liability negligence insurance policy. But I would think that if it's not our road, a motion to dismiss and at the initiation of that lawsuit would quickly resolve it with evidence that it's not our road and there's no legal document that indicates that the village is responsible for maintenance or repair. That would be probably disposed of in a motion to dismiss before the case even before the ink is dry on the paper.
There are signs in some locations, they don't explicitly indicate private property, but, you know, down at the corner over here, it says welcome to Piermont Landing, and over on Ash Street, there's also another sign. It's not very clear.
I don't want to belabor it, but just give me 3 seconds longer, 3.5. I come to Piermont, I drive through Flywheel Park, I drive up Gare Street. I'm from New Jersey. I have no reason to think that these roads are anyone's roads but Piermont roads. I'm relying, in fact, on the fact that they're Piermont roads, and then you say, oh, they're not. So I think it's an issue I suggest to get looked into if you really want to shield yourselves from liability. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, he brings up a good point. I think if you want to see an indication of which roads are public and which roads are private, just look at the pavement and you'll see what's cleared by our DPW, what's salted, what's plowed, and everywhere else that you see ice and snow build up, or primarily ice, like Flywheel, around Flywheel Park and Flywheel West, is obviously private. And I think maybe we should address that at some point. If the private landowner is responsible for maintaining the safety of those roads, not the village, there's a stark contrast, I'm sure you've all seen it driving around the village, between what is village responsibility and maintained and plowed and salted, and what is not. And that's a potential issue for us to deal with, I think.
Legally, it doesn't hurt if the village has some extra dollars, put signs up as soon as the village road ends.
It's not just a question, Dennis.
Private road, you know, with an arrow.
No, I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is it should be a safe passage for everybody on every road. And we shouldn't delineate between what's public and what we're required to maintain, and what's private, where the private landowner who's given us passage and easements along those private roads, they should be maintained.
I'm not gonna delay the meeting, but I can look very quickly, not now,
No.
but within
I'm
the next
just
few
raising
minutes.
it because
I'm sure,
I noticed it now.
I know that there's probably something in our code that talks about private property owner's responsibility to keep the sidewalks clear of snow and ice.
Right.
That's usually sidewalks. There might be something in here that, that could be interpreted as including private roads.
Well, so we've been through this before with the church on Verdun, and so my understanding is that it's not actually permissible for us to use village equipment and staff and taxpayer dollars indirectly to do snow removal on private property.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we do.
Okay,
Or
so
set
it
a
sounds like
precedent.
you were, yeah.
No. That should not be our responsibility. I'm not even suggesting that. What I'm saying, it should be the private property owners.
And maybe we could enforce that a bit better.
For real?
I mean, you know,
Spruce Street?
I already have your answer.
Paper Street?
172-4A, paragraph A. It says it right here. I'm not gonna recite it. You can read it at your leisure. It's clear here that not, including but not limited to private roads, driveways, and parking lots, not in addition to sidewalks, must be kept clear of ice and snow.
There you go.
Just to be clear, my issue is that nobody knows. It's not who on the books is responsible. It's to an innocent person who says, hey, I'm invited to Piermont, great Main Street, great restaurants, I think I'll walk over to the pier, and now I get hurt, and you didn't tell me that, when I stepped 1 foot further, it was no longer Piermont. That's the issue that I'm pointing out.
I understand, and I think that was Dennis's comment about if we had $2 for signs, we could put signs at entrances saying, you're entering private property, which might do something to ameliorate that. Okay, moving on. Our next item is reviewing all our special permits, including FEMA parking. And Joe, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to start with you and this plan that you presented us for the farmers market for 2026, which, thank you for putting it together. I think this did a great job of addressing the majority of the questions that people had, that I had personally, about what the schedule is, about what the locations would be. I will start out with just one question for Dennis, which is that the rental agreements, I don't know if this is something that is required or is just recommended, but there is no written rental contract for the use of Flywheel Park. And I think that's because the owner just wasn't comfortable doing that. Is that assumption correct?
I don't really know. He just, typically an entity wants to have a contract like the library, and they want to have the clauses in there to make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and leaving when I'm supposed to leave, and cleaning up and so forth. For whatever reason, I didn't request one. It was just a verbal agreement, and he said, go for it, and it's been working out fine. He's been happy. He's very concerned about making sure that, one of his big concerns is that we don't park illegally along particularly along like in front of Confetti's on
The north side edge.
yeah. So we always put cones there to try to prevent that, which helps. But other than that, I don't really know why he did ask for one.
Is that any kind of issue for us to?
For the village,
For
whether or not the farmer's market has a private contract with another private entity, the owner of the.
The lease to use the space that he wants a special permit for.
It's not our concern unless there's something in the code. I know I did research this, and I did send you an email, not on that specific question, but it had to do with the waiver of the permit fee. And my recollection of that code provision that relates to the permit that the farmer's market would need to operate vis-a-vis the village government.
Yes.
I don't recall reading anything in there that the applicant for that permit must have a written contract or agreement or license with the private property owner to hold the event or function that the permit application to the village is relating to. Again, in a couple of minutes, I could probably double check that.
Charlie.
But Charlie may know the answer of the
Well, I can just narrate on this. With the file op and with him renting spaces to people, he will never put it in writing. So there's these verbal agreements with Phil and some restaurants, supposedly that they get parking. He will not put it in writing. And then the number that the restaurant tells me is one number, and the number that Phil tells me is another number on how many spots they have. So that's been an ongoing issue for a while.
Well, and the interesting thing you bring up fee and lieu parking is that the code, the language in the code regarding fee and lieu parking explicitly says you have to provide proof of a lease agreement that you're using this private property. I don't recall either seeing it under special permit, but I know when you came in originally for the permit, when it was M&T, you did provide an
Correct.
agreement with M&T, probably because they wanted to have it more than you.
Right.
But it wasn't something difficult to produce, so it was part of your documentation and was helpful to us.
And I'll have the library one probably this week.
Okay.
Although I don't think there'll be a market this Sunday because of the temperatures.
I do that.
And snowstorms,
And that,
snow.
and that too, yeah.
Chapter 41 does not indicate that the applicant for the, what's called an event parade procession or special event permit, nothing even intimated that a rental agreement, a license agreement, a contract that the applicant has to show to the village board of trustees, has with the private property owner to have that event or, parade, etc. Although it does say one of the submissions is, but I would say would not cover this, is any other information which may be required by the board of trustees. I would say insisting upon that from an applicant for a special event permit. I'm not sure what the justification would be from a governmental concern viewpoint. Why would you need to see that?
Yeah, I don't have any particular concern about it, and I think we all understand that if he wasn't comfortable with it, it wouldn't be happening there.
Yeah, if a certain restaurant owner decided to come back,
Yeah, exactly.
we'd probably be gone from there, so.
So does anyone else have any questions or comments about this operating plan for the market for 2026?
I just have one question. It was very well done. Thank you, Joe.
Sure.
The old age question that deals with music
Sure,
and amplification,
yes, sir.
which has been raised, I don't have to tell you. You leave that word out of your...
The word amplification?
Statement. Do you plan on being amplified?
Yes.
Because
So I could put
the
that.
only issue I have is the language that you use with regard to volume, something about it not being disruptive to residents around the farm, which is really a subjective
Sure.
term and a can of worms. It's a small confined area, I know you get wind off the water. Does it have to be amplified? Is there a big difference from your standpoint, your viewpoint, having it non-amplified versus amplified? I have no problem
Yes.
with music, I love music. Acoustic music I like even more, but I'm asking you, so we don't get into these issues come the spring.
Yeah, because of the size of the park, and the way it's kind of out, if you're sitting there with an acoustic guitar, but no, you really don't hear it, unless you're right in front of it.
Yeah.
I think, one of the people that complained, and I spoke with her personally a few times, and turned it down. I thought that her initial complaint was very reasonable, to be honest. I think that it wasn't allowed. And so
You turned the speaker, I think, at that point.
we did that, but we also just turned it down in volume. And I gave that resident my phone number and said, call anytime if you think it's too loud,
Okay.
we will turn it down. So we've turned it down significantly. I think it was not an unreasonable request. I really don't think it was.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
She's not the only one. There are
Okay.
other people
Okay.
who've mentioned it, but for whatever reason, they didn't want to come forward, they're afraid, whatever.
Did not.
Um,
We could put some, like, if you want some,
Decibel level?
yeah, some sort of wording in there that makes it a little bit more, because it is subjective. Even when I wrote it, I wasn't sure how to best, convey that message, where it gives it some kind of,
Go ahead, give us a benchmark, maybe you could come up with a number,
Okay.
or the chief, and the two of you could put your heads together, come up with a number that, people like music, but they'll, it's 4 to 5 hours on every Sunday.
Right.
If I could just add,
Sure.
I think also the fact that you moved it facing the library instead of facing the residential units, I think has helped alleviate the impact. So I think
Okay.
that was a good improvement as well, where that
We
now
did
it's
switch them.
facing the library
Mhm.
as opposed to, just being on the street side facing into the park.
Gotcha, okay.
That
We
seemed
can go
like
back to
it was a
that
good
too, because we did switch it toward the end of the season again, back the other way, but we had the volume so low that it, the individual who had complained actually came to me at the market and said, wow, this is so much better, like, you really are keeping the volume down.
That's great.
Make it loud.
Make it louder.
All right, well, if that's all the questions we have, I think everything looks good for this. And have you already come in and done the permit renewal process, or?
I typically just usually someone calls me or I get a letter in the mail, usually I get a letter,
Got a
right?
letter that says there's renewal is up.
And it's usually,
Normally on the special permits, if there's no violations and no problems, in the past, they've always auto-renewed.
so we just get basically an invoice and
Yeah.
pay it.
Okay, that's fine. I just would like to get us into the habit of each year having this conversation, looking at an updated plan. If there's any new agreements with areas that you're, conducting the thing in, or if the number of vendors has changed,
Right.
anything along those lines, just like to make sure it files up to date.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Okay, so in terms of other special permits that we have here, the way the fee in lieu of parking legislation reads, you can get 3 parking spaces by right, no explanation needed. Between 4 and 9 spaces, you need to get a permit, and above 9 spaces, you need to get a special permit, which should be reviewed annually by the board. So we have several places that, for fee in lieu of parking, have a special permit issued to them. And that is Trattoria, Sidewalk Bistro, and Vino Amore next door. And so Trattoria gets 13 spaces, so they have 4 more than their 9 by regular automatically renewable permit. Sidewalk has 12 spaces, so 3 more than the 9, and Vino Amore has 25 spaces, so a lot more. And one of the consequences of reducing the fee in lieu of parking inventory to 60 for this year is that right now our total allocation is 79 spots, and that's more than 60. And so not everybody that had spots last year is going to be able to get all of the spots that they had last year again this year. One of the things, as I understand it, about fee in lieu of parking is that those spaces beyond 9, in terms of renewal, are distributed on a first come, first served basis. And so folks that have more than 9 that need to come in and get their renewals may end up, if they're tardy with that renewal, not being able to get all the spaces that they do currently have. But aside from that, it looks to me like everyone that has 9 or less spaces will be able to renew with no change and no particular impact. So I just wanted to make sure, this is something we've talked about a number of times. Things seem to shift around. It's the winter right now. This is the season when restaurants decide that they can't figure out how to make a profit and then want to look at a different business model. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody on the board was aware of who's currently using this program and who's using it by right, who's using it by permit, and who requires that additional annual reviewed special permit. So thank you very much for putting that together, Charlie. I think we may also have some, so I don't know how up to date this is, but has everybody paid for this year yet?
So, Community Market has not paid at all this year. So I sent them a letter, and now that the administration changed, they had a couple of months to get it done. We have to look forward into prosecuting them for not paying, or how we want to move forward on that. Vino Amori paid half originally, and then staggered some checks out to us to pay the rest. I do have the checks, but they get deposited every so often as he has enough money. But the only one that didn't pay at all and refused to pay was Community Market.